Today we are going to chat about travel mistakes that you should avoid making on your trips. I'm Kat. I love to travel. At the time of this recording, I have been to 28 countries, and so I want to share with you a bunch of travel tips to help you plan and make your travels easier. I'm wearing my Taylor Swift shirt because today is the first day that we have the Tortured Poets department, so I am super excited. I have been listening to it all day, but otherwise, let's get into it. So the very first thing to be aware of and to try not to do is try not to be over ambitious when you're planning your itinerary or booking things for your trip. This is still something I am working on and something that I personally need to learn, but if I'm paying a ton of money for a flight, I am going to want to get the most bang for my buck and see as many things as I can in a short amount of time. And this can be really good if you enjoy a fast-paced travel, but it can also be extremely tiring. It can burn you out, and you still want to make sure that you have enough time to fully absorb each place that you're going to, because you may or may not return to those places ever again. So really make sure that you use your time wisely and try not to jam pack a ton of things into your itinerary. That's just not good. If you're unsure about making an itinerary, I would recommend kind of trying a little bit of both, a little bit of fast-paced travel at the beginning of your trip and then maybe slow it down a little bit at the end if this is the first trip that you're ever planning, and that way you can learn what kind of traveler you are. Or another option would be to join a tour company that kind of plans out the trip for you, and then you're just kind of along for the ride, and then you don't have to worry about things like booking, planning. It takes a lot of the mental element out of it. So even if the trip is a little bit more fast-paced, you don't have to worry about every little thing yourself because somebody else is taking care of that for you. Mistake number 2 to avoid is not keeping an eye on how much cash you have on you, especially if you are in a place that doesn't accept credit cards or debit cards or whatever, and you essentially need cash to pay. So if you're just visiting a bunch of big cities, this probably won't be a problem for you, but if you are visiting a bunch of little towns, sometimes they only accept cash for payments, and if you don't have any cash, you might not be able to pay. And if they don't have an ATM in the town, which sounds like that would never happen, but it has happened to me, you don't have any access to money. Just be aware of your money situation, what kind of money is accepted, where you're going, and having access to get more money if you need it. And then also always just kind of keep a couple of coins on you in case you have to use the bathroom. In a lot of places around the world, using the bathroom costs money. So just make sure you have a couple of coins to use the bathroom and keep an eye on how much money you have, which kind of feeds into tip number 3, which is to make sure that you are accounting for the currency exchange in your budget. So depending on where you're going, your home dollar might be stronger and you might be feeling a little bit richer in different countries you go to, or your currency might be a little bit weaker and you're actually paying a little bit more for being in those countries. For example, I'm from Canada, so my home currency is the Canadian dollar, and it is a little bit weaker compared to the euro or the American dollar. So I have to factor into my budget that I'll probably need a little bit more money in order to pay for some things compared to other people, especially if I want to do things like shopping and stuff. All right, travel mistake number 4 to avoid is not booking ahead, especially if you're traveling during the peak season. So if you know your itinerary and you have things that you actually really want to do while you're traveling, make sure you just book them ahead of time because it can make it way easier, way less stressful. You can print your tickets before you leave for your trip, and that way if your phone gets stolen or it's dead or you don't have access to Wi-Fi or something and you can't access your tickets, you still have them printed out and you are ready to go, and you don't have to worry about booking things while actually on your trip because everything is just kind of planned out and you can just do it when you get there. On my first trip to Europe, I wanted to visit Rome and we were trying to wing it, so we weren't booking our accommodations or anything in advance, and we were traveling in June. And so when we went to go book our Rome accommodation about a week before, while we were still in like Barcelona or something, everything that was in our budget in Rome was booked up and filled. So we ended up having to stay outside of Rome in this tiny little village because we had a Eurail pass, so the train was free. So in order to afford to be able to go to Rome, we had to stay in a hostel that fit our budget and then use our train pass to take the train into Rome every day. And it worked out because we had the train pass, but had we not had the train pass, we would have been paying a ton of money to either stay into Rome or to commute into Rome each day. So just book stuff in advance, especially if you're on a budget and especially if you're visiting during high season. Another mistake to avoid is booking extra long travel days because you're trying to cover a ton of ground in a super small amount of time. So coming from Canada, everything is super far apart here. So when I was planning one of our trips to Europe, I was like, no big deal. Europe is super close together, all of the countries, and we can cross a lot of different countries in a super short amount of time. Whereas here, we would barely make a dent in crossing our province, let alone crossing Canada in a super short amount of time. So for some reason, young traveler me thought booking an 18-hour bus across Europe was a good idea, when it is in fact not a good idea. An 18-hour long travel day with a random transfer in the middle of the night at some random bus station that you don't even know what is going on is not a smart move. So, I mean, maybe you would be okay with that, but really think about what you're doing when you're planning these things, because during the planning stage, I was like, no big deal. But when you're actually living it, it is not ideal. So now I know, don't do that. But I mean, it makes a good story and it's a fun memory, but I would just advise against an 18-hour travel day because it was not fun, especially on a bus. All right, another travel mistake to avoid making is not leaving enough time for transfers. So this goes for layovers. If you are flying and you have a layover somewhere, make sure you have enough time to actually lay over and do a little bit of research on the airports that you are having a layover in. For example, if you are laying over in Toronto Pearson Airport in Canada, you're gonna want to budget a little bit of extra time because that airport is huge and it kind of sucks. It's just annoying. There's so many people always commuting in that airport. Like, it's a major hub, and so it can take a longer time to get off the plane. Things can go wrong, and it's just nice to have a little bit of breathing room, especially if you wanted to get food or something in between your flight. Make sure you budget a little bit of time in between your transfers, as well as when you are commuting on the train. Make sure you have enough transfer time, especially if you are new to the train system. Maybe a 5-minute transfer isn't ideal if you've never taken a train before. And yeah, just make sure you have enough time to transfer when you're booking and planning your transportation. All right, another thing that I am still working on is avoiding overpacking. If you're just going on a week-long vacation to a resort in Mexico where you're not gonna have to haul your bags around, then whatever, pack as much as you want. All you have to do is get it to the airport and then get it to your accommodation, and then it's just gonna sit there and it's not that big of a deal. But if you're doing a big backpacking trip like Europe, Central America, South America, Asia, and you're gonna be carrying your stuff everywhere, you are not going to want to be overpacking. I have packed things that I think will look cute and I might want to wear them, but they are in fact uncomfortable and I don't actually want to wear them, and then I don't end up wearing them and I don't want to leave them behind, so I'm ending up carrying these clothes around with me everywhere I go, and it's just weighing down my bag and it gets old after a while. And while you're packing, it's easy to think, I'll be fine, this isn't even that heavy, and then when you're in the thick of it, you are cursing your past self because why did you pack so much? So I know it can be super hard, but really try and be harsh with yourself and really try not to overpack if you're going to be carrying your luggage everywhere you go. Another travel mistake to avoid making, especially if you are a new traveler, is not planning your transportation from the airport into the city center or into wherever you're going. I did this on my very first backpacking trip to Europe. We planned our flight to London, but we didn't actually plan how we were going to get from Gatwick Airport to our hostel. And we really had no idea where our hostel was in London. So we ended up figuring it out with a lot of help from a bunch of friendly people. We basically didn't have data. We couldn't access the Wi-Fi. I can't even remember what we did, but somehow we got to the tube, and then there was a man at the tube and he helped us to figure out what tube to take to our hostel, and it was so far away, like on the outer edge of London, and I don't know why we did that. So just make sure you have a plan on how you're getting from the airport to your accommodation. Another thing you're going to want to make sure you do before traveling is to make sure that you have travel insurance. So the mistake is not having travel insurance during your trip. I've never actually had to make a claim for travel insurance, but usually I get the World Nomads insurance because I find it's a great rate and it covers a lot of things that I want, like there's camera protection if somebody steals my camera, as well as health stuff too. And then for travel insurance, just make sure you're getting a policy that works for what you are doing. If you're going scuba diving, you're probably going to need to add something extra onto your travel insurance policy because scuba diving usually isn't something that's covered in the basic policies, as well as things like skydiving or other kind of extreme sports like that. So just make sure you read what you're actually buying because not all travel insurance is the same. And then while you are planning your itinerary, another mistake to avoid making is not leaving enough time to recover from your trip. Now, this might be a luxury for some people because usually I am kind of booking my trip. I'm trying to get the most amount of time that I can while I have the time off. And so I have done it where I have landed at midnight one night and then I worked at like 9 a.m. the next day after like a 2-week long jaunt around Europe or something. And there's a time change. I was tired. It's a lot. So if you can, try and buffer at least one day in between a really long trip and going back to work so that you can feel like you can recoup and reset back into your space and back into normal life. But you know, sometimes you can't either. And in that case, it's fine. It's worth it for the trip. But if you can, really try and get in some buffer time, especially after your trip. And then the last mistake to avoid making on your travels is to make sure that you are actually enjoying the moment and not taking too many pictures. Now, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love taking pictures and photography is one of my main hobbies, but it's important to make sure that you're seeing things with your actual own eyes instead of just through the lens of your camera. I don't know, to me, I just like to see things with my own eyes. And it's important to just stop and take in where you're going. You know, like really make sure you're taking a mental picture as well so that you have the memory, and then use your camera to capture things as well, because you still want the paper memory too, because it's nice to look back on as your memories fade. So just be aware of what you're doing. Try and really absorb where you are, just being in the moment, as well as capturing some memories for the future. And those are all of the travel mistakes I would recommend avoiding during your trip. I have made most, if not all of those mistakes, and I still continue to make some of those mistakes to this day, so don't feel bad if that is you, but sometimes the mistakes make the best memories and the best stories afterwards. So if something does go wrong during your trip, really just try, okay, I just had to change out my memory card because I actually ran out of space while I was recording. So yeah, just remember that things will go wrong when you're traveling. If they don't, then that is awesome, but if they do, just take it on, deal with it, and you will get through it. But if you are a new traveler and you are going to be heading out on an airplane for the first time, feel free to check out my previous video where I share a bunch of airplane tips for first-time travelers, as well as most of my previous videos I have been creating on traveling basics and advice and information that I think would be helpful for brand new travelers. So feel free to check out that playlist if you are interested in that. And like this video if you did like it. Feel free to subscribe if you are interested in seeing more of videos from me. Thank you so much for being here and watching till the end. I hope you have an awesome rest of your day. Bye!